For over 2 decades, one statistic has terrified nearly everyone who's ever dreamed of opening their own restaurant. 90% fail within the first year. It's been repeated in business school lectures, cited in news articles, and used to talk countless people out of pursuing the idea entirely. There's just one problem. It's completely fabricated. The number traces back to a 2003 American Express commercial that cited no actual source or research behind it whatsoever. The real data, tracked by the Bureau of Labor Statistics and researchers at UC Berkeley, shows something considerably less dramatic and honestly more interesting. Only 14 to 17% of restaurants close in their first year. But here's the part that actually deserves your attention. The part the panicked 90% myth accidentally obscured for 20 years. The restaurant industry doesn't have a first-year problem. It has a structural math problem, one that quietly grinds down even well-run businesses over years, not months. Today, we're opening the blueprint on the restaurant industry to show you exactly why the numbers are built against owners from day one. Welcome to Faulty Blueprint. Let's open the file. Let's start with what it actually costs to open the doors in the first place, because this is where the structural problem begins. According to industry cost analysis firm UpMetrics, opening a restaurant in the current market typically requires an initial investment somewhere between $111,750 and $626,500, depending heavily on size, location, and concept. Separate research places the full range even wider, from $107,000 for larger or more ambitious concepts. That's before a single customer walks through the door. Build-out costs, kitchen equipment, initial inventory, licensing, insurance, and the first several months of payroll all have to be covered before revenue even begins flowing in reliably. And most of that capital comes from either personal savings, small business loans, or investors, all of which carry their own repayment pressure from day one. Once the doors actually open, the real structural problem reveals itself, and it's not a one-time expense. It's the profit margin itself. Industry-wide data consistently places average restaurant profit margins somewhere between 3 and 5.5%, depending on the specific study and year. To put that in perspective, a restaurant bringing in $1 million in annual revenue, which sounds like a genuinely successful business by most measures, might be clearing somewhere between $30,000 and $55,000 in actual profit after every single expense is paid. That's before accounting for a single slow month, a single piece of broken equipment, or a single unexpected rent increase. Compare that margin to almost any other small business category, and restaurants consistently rank among the thinnest, most fragile profit structures in the entire commercial economy. Labor costs make up one of the heaviest, least flexible pieces of that thin margin. Recent industry surveys found that 88% of restaurant operators reported increased labor costs in a single recent year, with the overwhelming majority expecting those costs to keep climbing further still. The gap between profitable and unprofitable operators often comes down almost entirely to how tightly labor costs are managed as a percentage of revenue, with data from restaurant technology company Toast showing profitable operations typically keep labor costs around 34% of revenue, compared to nearly 43% at unprofitable ones. That's a difference of less than 9 percentage points, separating a restaurant that survives from one that doesn't, in an industry where staffing shortages and rising minimum wages have made cutting that number considerably harder than it used to be. Food costs compound the pressure further, and this is where the industry loses money in a way that rarely gets discussed outside operator circles. The restaurant industry as a whole loses an estimated $162 billion annually to food waste alone, a staggering figure driven by spoilage, over-ordering, inconsistent portion control, and inventory that simply doesn't get tracked closely enough at the individual restaurant level. Supply chain disruptions in recent years have pushed wholesale food costs upward. At the same time, labor costs were climbing, squeezing restaurant margins from both major expense categories simultaneously, a pincer effect very few other small business models have to absorb at the same intensity. Rent and location add a third, largely unavoidable pressure point on top of labor and food costs. Roughly 55% of diners report choosing where to eat based primarily on location, meaning restaurants are locked into a difficult trade-off from the moment they sign a lease. Prime, high visibility, high foot traffic locations command premium rent, while cheaper locations save money up front, but can starve a restaurant of the walk-in traffic it needs to survive at all. Unlike labor or food costs, rent is typically locked in through a multi-year lease, meaning a restaurant can't easily adjust this expense downward if sales underperform, turning what should be a manageable fixed cost into a long-term structural liability if the location doesn't perform as projected. Here's where the long-term survival numbers become genuinely revealing. While only 14 to 17% of restaurants close in their first year, that number climbs dramatically over time. Roughly half of all restaurants fail to survive past the 5-year mark, and only about 20% make it to 15 years of continuous operation. That pattern tells a specific story. Restaurants aren't typically failing because of rookie mistakes made in year 1. They're failing because razor-thin, 3 to 5% margins simply cannot absorb years of compounding pressure from labor cost increases, food cost inflation, rent escalation clauses built into most commercial leases, and the eventual need for equipment replacement or renovation that inevitably comes due after several years of heavy daily use. Franchise and chain restaurants demonstrate this structural problem in reverse, offering a useful comparison. Chains and franchises consistently show meaningfully better survival rates than independent restaurants, largely because centralized purchasing power reduces food costs, established brand recognition reduces the marketing spend needed to build foot traffic, and standardized operating systems reduce the labor inefficiency that quietly bleeds thin-margin independent operations. Independent restaurants, meanwhile, are typically fighting the exact same rent, labor, and food cost pressures without any of those structural advantages, which is why roughly 17% of independent full-service restaurants close within their first year alone, a meaningfully higher rate than franchise operations facing the identical broader economic conditions. So here's the pattern running through this entire blueprint, and it's worth stating plainly. Restaurants aren't failing primarily because of bad food, bad service, or inexperienced owners, though those factors certainly make a fragile situation worse. They're operating inside a business model with some of the thinnest profit margins in the entire small business economy, facing 3 major cost categories: labor, food, and rent, that are simultaneously rising, difficult to control, and largely non-negotiable once a lease is signed and a staff is hired. A restaurant doesn't need to make one catastrophic mistake to fail. It simply needs several ordinary years of rising costs to slowly erode a margin that was never more than a few percentage points wide to begin with. If this changed how you'll think about the next local restaurant you walk into, let us know in the comments which part of this breakdown surprised you the most. And don't forget to subscribe to Faulty Blueprint, because next time, we're opening the file on another industry where the math was broken long before anyone walked through the door.